questions, you just get in. You can just walk in, and you're safe and you're protected. That's Shabbos. I know in my life, I'll tell you just about how I came to keep Shabbos and things like that, and hopefully some deep ideas about Shabbos. But I just feel like when I'm in Shabbos, no one can get me. It's like I turn off my phone, and it's absolutely one of my favorite moments of the whole week. I've got my iPhone over here, and it's sort of like I turn it off before Shabbos starts, and it's my way of saying, you're not the boss of me. I'm the boss of you. And it's a great moment, because I'm like one of these guys, I'm sure all of you probably fall into this category too, but it's like pretty much all screens all the time. And it is like, you get to return to yourself. When you put that thing away, or when I turn that thing off, and it's a really, really good feeling. So I tell you a teaching, and this is maybe one of my favorite teachings of all time. So this is from a Hasidic master named the Ishbitzer Rebbe. He was a great Polish master about 100 years ago or so, maybe a little bit more. And he pointed out that there's these two Hebrew words that sound very, very similar, okay? One is simcha, which will translate as happiness, and one is oneg, which will translate as joy. Or rather, I'm sorry, which will translate as bliss. Okay, so you have simchas yantif, like the word simcha is often associated with the holidays. And oneg is associated with Shabbos, like oneg Shabbos. I don't know if ever of you have been to a party on a Friday night, they call it an oneg Shabbos, right? So you see that word connected to Shabbos. Anyway, listen to this unbelievable teaching. So the question is, what's the difference between these two words for happiness? What's the difference between simcha and oneg? All right, so you ready? So simcha, joy, is when God gives you something that you didn't have before. Oneg, bliss, is when God shows you what it is you've had all along. Isn't that beautiful? And oneg, that special blessing where your eyes are opened and you're able to feel what it is that you've had all along, that's a special blessing that comes with Shabbos. So there's something really holy about Shabbos, because it's not just a break from like the rat race, but it's a chance to like really appreciate what it is that you have. And we're constantly in this place of acquiring. And so a lot of times you just never appreciate like what it is that you've actually accomplished. And all of like today, people are talking about mindfulness and things like that. It's like one of the big buzzwords, and it's a great word. I'm not saying anything critical, God forbid. Mindfulness is fantastic. But you have to remember to be mindful. And that's not always easy to do. And what Hashem gave us, what God gave us as like one of the greatest gifts, is he sort of institutionalized 25 hours of mindfulness every week. That's what Shabbos is, where, you're, like I say, you're around a table, you're talking with your friends, with your family. So many people have the craziest idea of what happens on Shabbos. Like, I don't know if you've ever been asked this, but I absolutely have been, where people say, so you sit in the dark alone in your house? It's like, what are you talking about? I'm like throwing back l'chaims. It's the best food. It's this rolling party. We're at one person's house and we're at another person's house. People are joking. They're telling stories. It's deep. It's meaningful. It's like, it's a party. It's like this rolling party. So anyway, the world still is catching up with what Shabbos is all about. And I didn't grow up keeping Shabbos. And I had sort of like this journey to Shabbos. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my own personal story. And by the way, I'm very curious what you guys have to say. I feel self-conscious just kind of talking. So if any of you like want to interject or ask a question or want to hear more on a particular thing, put up your hand emoji or just raise your hand or whatever it is, or just kind of wave at me, and we can make this more of a conversation, which I would love. So anyway, when I've had this whole like long career writing for television, and I never wanted to be a writer. And so I'll just tell you how I became a writer, because like one thing kind of starts to roll into the other, and then it all kind of segues with kind of Jewish stuff. So I'll just tell you the writer part right now. I went to Harvard, and at the end of my freshman year, I overheard a conversation between two people. And one said to the other, "What are you doing this summer?" And the other one said, "Well, I've got this like high-powered banking internship, I don't remember the company, like JP Morgan, something pretty fancy." It's like, "What are you doing?" And she was like, "Oh, I think I'm going trekking in Asia." And I remember thinking, I didn't know you were supposed to make fancy summer plans. Like, I don't have any plans whatsoever. So I called my mom, and I grew up in New York City on 79th Street and Broadway on the Upper West Side. I called my mom and I said, "Mom, what am I going to do this summer vacation?" She said, "Well, I can talk to the superintendent and you can be the elevator man in the building." And I was like, "Make the call." And she calls me back, "You got the job." And I was like, "Yes." So this is, believe it or not, this is how I became a writer. Isn't that strange? Like, you would think, okay, what is the connection between being an elevator man and becoming a Hollywood writer? But this is 100% true. I never read the books that I was assigned. And I was like one of those guys who could just catch on really fast and whatever, fake my way through it. But I felt guilty for Harvard. I felt bad for Harvard for having admitted me, because I hadn't done any of the reading. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do penance. I'm going to try to read the great books that I was supposed to have read, or that I imagined my classmates have read. And I'm going to read them on the elevator. And reading like all these great books on the elevator made me want to be a writer. Isn't that crazy? So I actually became a writer because I was an elevator man. And I loved reading so much that I took the job back as an elevator man every single summer. And then by the time I had to graduate, I had this sort of like awkward moment where I realized I couldn't fill a resume. I had Harvard and elevator man, and like 2/3 of the resume was like, just white space. And this is true. People, companies were coming to campus to like recruit, and I couldn't get a meeting. No one would even meet with me. So I thought at one point that I would, maybe like kind of rejigger it, because the building was run by Kenton Associates. So I thought, maybe I'll put down special intern for Kenton Associates, researching problems in urban transportation, And I remember like when people would ask me, "So what'd you do this summer?" I'd be like, "Traveling." You don't have to know everything. The less you know, the better. Just trust me. I got it under control. But the reason why I love doing it is because it was like this place where I could just read and read and read and read and read. And anyway, senior year, I was writing with someone. I was on the Harvard Lampoon, which is the humor magazine there, and I was on with Conan O'Brien at the same time. So, and I don't know if you know the name Greg Daniels, but he created The American Office and King of the Hill and Parks and Rec, like all these classic shows. Anyway, he was on at the same time also. So there was really like this amazing group of like comedy writers that were all going to go out to Hollywood together. And so I was kind of part of that crew, which was really fun and interesting. Anyway, I remember Greg said something to me early on before I, started like keeping Shabbos and stuff like that. We were having lunch together and he said, just out of nowhere, can an ant outthink a man? And I was like, no. And he said, then how can man outthink God? And I was like, whoa, I think you just changed my life. But, we were at a Denny's at the time. So, yeah, I don't know if any of you are into like science or if any of you have heard of Brian Greene. He's a best-selling author. He writes about physics and string theory and everything like that. Anyway, we grew up together, and I think that there are kind of two movements out there in the world right now. This is kind of just me talking, just my casual observation. I think that there's the group of people out there who think that we don't know everything. We absolutely don't know everything there is to know, but we will one day. And we're on track to being able to know everything there is to know. That's like, I would say, one group of the world. And I would say the other group of the world is like, what are you, crazy? Well, we're never going to know everything there is to know in the world, because God is infinite and we're finite and God made our brains. So how are we ever going to know everything that the one who made our brains knows and made the universe knows? Now, guess which camp I fall into? I fall into the second camp. And I don't think that that is oh, you're so religious, or you're a believer. I actually think that's rational. I think that that actually is just logical. Then how can you know everything there is to know in the entire universe? So to me, you can have like a shelf full of Nobel Prizes, but if you think that you're going to know everything there is to know eventually, I don't know. I think someone who says we can't know everything there is to know is already ahead of that person. I'll tell you something else, something even more absurd. Right? God is infinite. He makes our brains. And then we, with our brains, tell God what he is and isn't capable of. Right? Isn't that kind of strange? Kind of ironic / absurd. So anyway, I was thinking about a lot of these things. And I'll tell you something else, a teaching that had a very big effect on me, just in terms of my own journey. Well, I'll just tell you the Hollywood stuff. So I got a job. Amazingly, I got a job at 21 on an HBO show. Do you guys know the John Oliver show? So it wasn't that, because, that's a more recent show. But it was kind of like in its day, I got a job on the John Oliver show. You know what I mean? It was called Not Necessarily the News, which is, a bit ancient. But anyway, that was like a hot, hip show at the time. And that was my entree to television writing. And I always like this story, which is that when the day we showed up, 2 of the writers didn't show up, and we found out that they had been fired, and the 2 of us, me and my partner, had been hired. And on the wall of their office, they still had their children's Polaroid pictures. And that was my introduction to like Hollywood. It's like, okay, these people mean business. You either give them what they want or you're out the door. And it reminds me of this like old joke that my dad told me, which is that there was this Jewish kid who got kicked out of every Jewish school, and they ran out of Jewish schools to send him to. So they sent him to a Catholic school, and he gets his report card back, straight A's. And the parents are like, what's up? And he said, well, I showed up the first day and I saw that they had nailed one of the boys to the wall. And I thought, these people mean business, you know? So it's like that first day I walked in, it's sort of like, whoa, you give them what they want or you're out. And I remember that first day I got this memo, which was that Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we had to hand in pieces like comedy sketches set in an ice skating rink because they were going to shoot at an ice skating rink. And I remember thinking, wait a second, I have to be funny on paper by 5 o'clock on Wednesday at an ice skating rink? And it's sort of like, welcome to the world of professional comedy writing. That's what it is. Like, you can't like wait till you're in a funny mood or be like, oh, my girlfriend or my boyfriend broke up with me. I'm not feeling very funny today. None of that works. You show up, you write something funny, and that's it. That's the job. So anyway, things were going kind of, well, actually, it was kind of funny because we got a 3-week trial period on that job. And after the first couple of weeks, they were like, we're not so sure about you guys. So they gave us, but we were doing just well enough that they gave us a second 3-week trial period. And then that one went much better. And they decided that they liked us. So they gave us a 4-week contract, which was, that was my introduction to job security Hollywood style, which is to say there is none. And if, I don't know if any of you are aspiring comedy writers or Hollywood fill in the blanks, but be acutely aware that that's the life you're looking at. I mean, it is, you know, the 3-week trial period into the 4-week contract. That's what it is. And it's hard to recommend that lifestyle. But anyway, you know, follow your bliss. So one thing led to another and things were going well. And, you know, I was so grateful to God. I really was. I wanted to say thank you back to God. And while I didn't grow up in a home that had Shabbat or Kashrut, it was like a strongly Jewish house. You know, we were Reformed, but it was like very strong sense of Jewish identity, very positive Jewish background. But not observant. And so I did have some Jewish knowledge. And there was something kind of going on with me as, you know, things were going well and things like that. And I had seen a lot of life. Like I said, I grew up in New York City on 79th and Broadway. My idea of a good time was like, okay, what will kill me? All right, now just step it back, like just a little bit. Okay, that's a good time. So I had seen a lot of the world. And, you know, I was starting to like extrapolate, meaning to say, okay, well, what does that lead to? And, you know, now I had been through Harvard, had hung out, you know, sons of the rich and famous, this and that, parties, Hollywood now, you know, and, you know, I wasn't hanging out with people, like there were no Russian oligarchs on super yachts in my life. Like, I don't want to mislead you and tell you that I was hanging out with the highest elites. I was not. But I had seen kind of enough to know where, quote unquote, success was leading. And I don't know, like, have you ever had like really bad vodka? Like supermarket vodka? Okay, it tastes terrible. Have you ever had like really premium vodka? It doesn't taste that much better. that's just the reality. I've had both, you've had both. You know I'm not making this up. And to think that people throw their lives away for the difference between the two. Like, let me put it to you another way. People would literally throw themselves in front of a bus to be successful. Like, I want success. I desperately, desperately want success. What would you do for success? Almost anything. Okay. I think if you want to be really honest, maybe it's not about you, but just in terms of what you've observed in your life, you would probably agree that that's true. I think that that's true. But here's the interesting part. Go up to an average person who would give anything for success and ask them to define success. And I think most people would go, well, it's it's like, whoa, backtrack. You're willing to throw yourself in front of a bus for success and you literally can't define it? And there's a problem here. We have a problem. And, one of the incredible things is, I remember my dad, God bless him, his soul should have an aliyah, he should just be, he's in the next world, he should be blessed. He taught me so much about life, but I remember, like, when I was first studying Torah and things like that, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and he didn't have that background, that's not what he was doing. And I remember, like, talking to him about some of these things, and I realized that he was kind of more or less, and he was a smart guy, he was a professor, believe it or not, professor of psychology. And he was trying to figure out, like, the biggest things in life on his own. And I realized we have thousands of years of geniuses on top of geniuses, on top of geniuses, on top of geniuses. This unbroken chain of prophets and scholars and tzaddikim, holy people, who have thought about these questions and have imparted us answers. And you don't have to figure it all out in your chair. I mean, one of the biggest mitzvahs is to study Torah and to ask questions and to try to understand things deeply and to challenge and everything like that. I mean, the Talmud is, if you learn one page of Talmud a day, it takes you 7 years to get through it. And what is the Talmud? Basically, all questions. So we're on board with questions because Judaism's approach is, if something is true, questioning it only makes it stronger, right? It's the things that aren't true that are afraid of questions. Torah is 100% not afraid of questions. So we have to ask questions and we have to challenge. But what I'm trying to tell you is we have answers. We have answers. And, I can tell you, I went to top schools. So I know what serious learning is. And I can tell you that there is nothing that compares to the wisdom of the Torah. Nothing. And if you haven't experienced it in your own life, find another teacher or keep exploring or ask for someone to recommend books. By the way, I don't know, whoever won the prize today for the best book, I don't know who won that, but there's so many good books out there. You can't even believe it. So anyway, I decided that I wanted to start keeping Shabbos, and that was the way I was going to say thank you to God for all the success that I was having. I remember one time walking down the street, it was Friday night and the sun was starting to set. And I thought, wow, every time the sun sets Friday night, that's God saying Shabbat Shalom. And I thought, how can I say Shabbat Shalom back to God? And I thought, oh, maybe if I kept Shabbos, that would be my way of saying Shabbat Shalom back to God. So you might think, like, how did I work it with my employer? And the answer is I was unemployed. So it went very smoothly. Not an issue. But then I got a job. It was like, I see, be your own boss. Yeah, Benjamin. So I was keeping Shabbos for about 3 months. And then I get a job on a comedy called Women in Prison. Now, if that doesn't sound funny to you, America agreed. There were 99 shows on the air in prime time, and this was, I kid you not, ranked 99th. It was literally the bottom rated show on all of television. And anyway, but it was an opportunity. I was very happy to have it. I had been writing for about 2 years at this point. And I went in, I didn't mention anything about keeping Shabbos to my bosses, just because I had never done it before. And it was just, I guess naivete. I wasn't trying to be sneaky or finessing anything. I just didn't know to bring it up. And the first Friday night, it was in August, Shabbos comes in late, not much to do on the show, came and left, no issues. Second Friday night, okay, things got complicated. I'm sitting there in this conference room in front of this big picture window, palm trees, very Hollywood, and I'm literally watching the sun set in front of my face. And I lived about 5 minutes from the studio. And I realized, how am I going to get out of this? Because it's one of these meetings that seems like it's about to end, but it also seems like it's not about to end. And I'm thinking, like, wow, at a certain point, if I don't leave right now, I'm gonna miss it. So I literally didn't know what to do, because like Shabbos is like all this religious stuff is like very personal, and you don't necessarily feel comfortable discussing it with anyone, much less a room full of strangers and your boss, right? So I did the only thing I could figure out. I stood up and I walked out the room. I didn't say anything. I literally just ghosted, And like in retrospect, I think they probably thought I was going to the bathroom, but I never came back. And I just started like running as fast as I could to my car. And I remember thinking, man, for a day of rest, this is causing me a lot of anxiety, And I always remember this story. So I don't know if you've heard it, but it's Rabbi Mordechai Becher, who's a big speaker. He gave me permission to tell this story. It's his story. Anyway, true story. He was giving the Shabbos program in Hong Kong, and they put him on something like the 80th floor, and he wasn't taking the elevator on Shabbos, okay? So you got to picture this. He's like 75 flights up the service stairwell when an Asian worker like sees him, gives him this look, they lock eyes. He realizes he has to explain his behavior somehow. And he says to him, "You don't understand. It's my day of rest," right? So it's like, it's insane, right? So anyway, I realized I have to talk to my bosses. I have to tell them what's going on. And the next week, Monday comes in, I tell my partner, who wasn't Jewish, great guy, fantastic guy. I tell him, look, I want to, just tell him about Shabbos and everything like that. And he says, go ahead. So after work, I went into their office and I said, I think these were the exact words. I just was wondering if it's okay if if I left a few hours early on Friday nights so that I can observe the Sabbath. And they looked at me and they said, no, it's not all right. And had we known that you were going to do this, we never would have hired you to begin with. And now that you're telling us that you want to do this, you have to make a decision, because otherwise, and they didn't complete the sentence, right? But I think there's only one way to complete that sentence, really. Otherwise, you're fired. So they told me to think about it, and I didn't want to be confrontational with them. So I said, okay, I'll think about it. But my mind was made up. I went back to my house. I called my agent. He said, what are you going to do? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I'm not going to work. And then he said to me, if you don't work, then you'll never work in television again. So, you know, like in old Hollywood movies where they say you'll never work in this town again? Have you ever heard that phrase? I was like, whoa, people actually say that, and someone is saying it to me. You know, it was very heavy. Anyway, I went to my partner and I told him, you see, it was really awkward because my partner was about to lose his job because of me, because I wanted to keep Shabbos. Which, like, if you think of like an inauspicious start to a spiritual career, I will begin my service of God by getting this holy, innocent person fired from his high-paying job, which he loves. What a holy man I am. You know, like, a terrible way to begin. A terrible way to begin. So I was, you know, I was sensitive to the awkwardness of this, but I didn't know what to do exactly. They had hired us as a team. He wouldn't have gotten the job without me, but he was about to be fired because of me. I said, listen, if you want to try to stay on the show without me, that's fine. I'll never hold it against you. And he said, yeah, I think I would like to try to stay on the show without you. And I was like, what? and he said, but because I think I'd always wonder what would have happened to my career. And I totally got that. So I was told I was losing my job. I'll never work in television again. And I'm losing my partner that I had done literally all my work professionally with, and even back to the Lampoon, because that's where we started writing together. So probably you thought I was freaking out, but I wasn't. I was nervous, like anyone would be, but I knew nothing bad would happen from keeping Shabbos. Like, I might even have to find another career. I was aware of that, but nothing bad was going to happen from keeping Shabbos. I knew that with all of my heart. And it turns out that they kind of rejiggered my job title and rejiggered my salary, but they kept me up. And, you know, I'm saying this not to brag or anything like that, but I've won an Emmy Award for my work on The Simpsons. I have a Golden Globe Award for my work on Third Rock from the Sun, some other awards. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because the story that I just told you, I think, is maybe the proudest moment of my life. I heard this quote, I don't know who said it, some historical figure, that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything. And that resonates with me. And, you know, a lot of times it's sort of like we've got this thing like growing inside of us, and we're afraid of it because, like, if I let this thing out, this sensitivity, the sense that there's more to the world than I can see with my eye, that there's something greater than me, that how is there even a world? How is there even a Jewish people still? Like, there's something so strongly rooted in every single Jew. And you begin to feel it grow inside of you. One of the teachings that I think is amazing is every single person is created with a God-shaped hole inside of them. And, you know, it's a very particular shape, and the only thing that fits into it is God. That's the only thing that fills it, because it's a God-shaped hole, and everyone is born with it. God creates us with it. It's like, I think of it as like a USB port, you know? Like everyone's born with this USB port. Why is it there? So that you can plug in, right? People try to fill it with other things. Drugs, sex, career, money, shopping, food, entertainment. But nothing fills it. Why? Because it's a God-shaped hole. You know it from like jigsaw puzzles. When there's like one particular piece, the only thing that fits in that piece is the piece itself. So I was experiencing that in my life. A lot of great things going on, but that sense of connection, which I desperately wanted. I desperately wanted. Because I knew that this world is so filled with meaning. And everyone wants to bombard you with is meaninglessness. And honestly, I feel like I was being strangulated by meaninglessness. I feel like I was being absolutely suffocated with boredom and meaninglessness. That's the truth. And if you looked at my life, you'd say, he's leading a very exciting life. I would like to lead that life. But Shabbos, right? Shabbos is home. When I get to Shabbos, I feel like, I know it's a time-bound construct, but I feel like I've arrived back home. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. Anyway, I could talk on and on and on and on, but maybe I'm finished with time. But if any of you have any questions or anything like that, and by the way, it can be about your favorite Simpsons episode. I don't care. Whatever you want to talk about. I'm easy.
I have one quick question, David, that I just put in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were talking about how everybody has this hole that is unique.
God-shaped hole, yeah.
So is it unique to eat? Is no one person's whole, like, is it different based on everybody's interpretation of God? Like, do you believe that it's different in each individual? That only the God in their eyes can fit that shape?
Right. So yeah, so I think okay, so this is just a metaphor, right? So we'll get metaphoric about it. I think that how we perceive it is going to differ from person to person. So in that case, I think it will be individual, but I think that essential relationship, because what is our soul? Our soul is a piece of God, right? And the godliness within us recognizes the godliness outside of us, because it's the same energy. And it's sort of like that aspect of God within us longs to unite with that which it recognizes as itself, which is Hashem. So in that case, it's the same for everyone. But kind of how we relate to it through the unique circumstances that each one of us travels will be different, I think. Yeah. Does anyone else have some thoughts or complaints?
No complaints yet. I just wanted to
Angry.
say
Yeah.
I appreciated all the gems that you dropped, the Torah teachings and just the wisdom and respect to you on your journey in your career, and especially that moment that you shared with us with the folks in Hollywood. I forget what show you were on at the time
Yeah, women in prison.
about
Yeah.
Shabbos, and in that moment where you have to stand for something, and just kind of keeping your feet, you know, um, firm, and taking your stance on it. Just much respect to you, and just enjoyed all that you shared with us. And Simpsons was a classic show, so was Malcolm
Yeah.
in the Middle. So yeah,
Thank
res-
you, Eric. I appreciate
yeah,
it. There's a piece of imagery that you're reminding me of that I like. Maybe you guys, maybe it will resonate with you guys too. I don't know. You remember looking in a microscope? Probably, I don't know when the last time you looked in a microscope was, maybe high school or something like that. But do you remember the experience where you turn the lens and the little slide would finally come into focus, and then you turn it one more time and you'd go, ah, now it's in focus.
yeah,
And then and then sometimes you turn it even one more time after that and you go, ah, now it's really in focus. Do you remember that feeling? Do you remember that feeling? So,
yes,
the Talmud says that who is the realized person? Someone whose insides, like their soul, matches their actions, right? Like a lot of people are well intentioned or they've got quote unquote a good heart. But if you look at kind of like what they're doing, it doesn't really match up with who they think they are or what they'd like to. And I remember like that moment of focus when I started keeping Shabbos and went through that test. I felt like my insides and my outsides were in harmony. And I got to say, it was one of the greatest feelings of my life. And, I go up and down. Everybody goes up and down. I'm not saying I've maintained that plateau or anything so great or anything like that. But it was a great moment. And I wish it on all of you that you should have moments like that where you really feel like that truest, best aspect that's inside of you lines up with what you're actually doing in this world. Okay. Isa, I see your hand icon is up. Do you want to ask something?
If I could just interrupt, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Are we all done? Are we all done?
So I'm going to take the Iceland crew. We have a session, but if anyone else wants to stay for questions, I'm going to leave. Is that okay, David, or do you have to go? Can you stay for a while?
No. I'm happy to go. I don't want to hold anyone
I have.
hostage.
Can I ask the one question?
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll make the answer fast.
Okay.
So my question was, how do we get like we see a lot of values, like mostly Christian values and Christian protagonists within Hollywood. What would be kind of a movement to get more Jewish values and Jewish characters within Hollywood?
Yeah, for the first time, like that's something that I sort of have been thinking about myself and have been asked many times. And for the first time over the last few years, it seems like there's been a shift. And if you look at like Netflix and things like that, like these hyper specific niche communities are now being featured for the first time in shows that are like hit shows, international hit shows. Shtisel is one example where you can have like very positive portrayals of Jewish characters, like and I don't know if you've seen. Did anyone see the Jewish matchmaking show on Netflix? Did any of you watch that? I thought it was totally positive. I really did. I like the beginning of the season more than the end of the season. They kind of switched characters on you like mid-season. I was like, what happened to that first group? But but they were showing like people putting on tefillin and like at fancy coffee shops. And, you know, I thought that the Shadchan was dropping Jewish wisdom in a beautiful way. Like we keep our bodies apart so our hearts can connect. I mean, like really short and sweet, like, anyway, so I think that that time has finally come that you're talking about. And it's just about writing very true characters in all their specificity. But if you write a specific cultural character true, that truth will be universal and it will resonate beyond just the target group. The whole world will be able to appreciate it, and you see it over and over and over again. So anyway, that would be my answer to your question.
Thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. David, I bless you that you should write that show.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. Thank